All right, it looks like we're ready to go. Everybody seems to have gotten quiet all by themselves. I don't need to do any hand clapping techniques or anything like that. This is my distinct pleasure to be here and welcome you to the Science and Technology portion, breakout session of the Food Innovation Conference here in Berkeley. I am honored to have two guests with me, both of whom are former Michelin star chefs. I feel completely unworthy to be on the panel with them, but I will do the best that I can. My name is Matthew Lang, and if you need to tweet something about something that I said, you can reach me at MATEOLAN, Mateo Lan, on Twitter, and that's my picture up there because, as I said, I'm not worthy. Our first guest is Lisa Fetterman. She is the founder and CEO of Nomiku. You can reach her at Lisa Q Fetterman on Twitter. And you can, if you want to tweet about Nomiku itself, Nomiku, it's at Nomiku. Our second guest is Chris Jones. He is the Vice President of Culinary Innovation at Hampton Creek. And if you'd like to reach him on Twitter, you can reach him at Chef Chris Jones. And you can reach Hampton Creek at Hampton Creek. Now, you guys really need to switch so you're on the same side, so people don't get confused. They're going to start calling you Chris.
Yeah, that'd be weird.
Lisa is the original developer of the first home sous vide appliance. And I think we'll start with you, Lisa, in terms of how you came to embrace food science and technology in terms of developing your product. And then we'll move into Hampton Creek. Sounds great? Okay. I'm going to sit down. I don't know.
All right. Chill. Do I need the microphone?
You have a mic.
Okay, great. So when I started working in kitchens at Babo and Jean-Georges, I saw this huge hulking piece of laboratory equipment. And we would cook a decent amount of food in it. Everybody in here knows what a sous vide machine is, right? Yes, okay. This is so weird because this never happens.
Why don't you just explain what sous vide, because
Sure,
there might be some timid people in the back who are
That's
afraid
right.
to raise their hands.
It's a precise temperature cooking machine that every single top chef in the world uses, bar none. It's already widely industrially adopted, like for 50 years now. And nobody had brought it into the home, like a home sous vide immersion circulator, until Nomiku. Before then, when I introduced it in 2012, the cheapest one was $1,000. And it was like this big. Nomiku is still the smallest one on the market, and now we're Wi-Fi connected because internet. Also more things, which I'll get into. But that's Nomiku, and I was fascinated by the science of it because, like, heat is the secret ingredient in the kitchen. It changes everything. We know so little about it, and we always like have it blasting from a freaking fire hose, right? And then we're like, what really happens when food becomes cooked? And why can't I create the same results with my immersion circulator that I did in a wok or something? So I just kept studying how temperatures affected food, how temperatures affected certain proteins, and then I was like, hey, I really, really need one of these for my home. So we made one for ourselves at a makerspace.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got an example of how science and technology have prompted you to develop not a food product, but a food technology product, and essentially scale it down, which I think is an important concept. So I think one of the things that we'll get to later on in the conversation is this idea of scaling down. I want to quiz you a little bit more about that.
There's nothing like scaling down that's quite like the maker revolution. That's like the epitome of taking like big stuff and making it digestible, and then you have to. The irony of it is that you have to scale up again, but we'll get to that.
Right. I think so. So to hold on to that, I think one of the example that I give when I'm talking about scaling down is the idea of our cell phones, right? So the average cell phone now has more computational power than the computer that sent humans to the moon. Mm-hmm. And we, in essence, gave everybody computational power not by scaling up. we don't all connect to one giant supercomputer. We all have tiny supercomputers in our pockets.
Now you're just making me feel bad, because why aren't I on the moon right now with my phone?
That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to hold the thought about scaling down for a minute, and I want to shift to this idea of instead of getting economies of scale from scaling up, one of the other things that I think is very important about what's happening in food and tech is this idea of economies of information. And as far as I can tell right now, economies of information are really empowering the artisanal movement. And Chris, we spoke earlier, and you mentioned to me that one of the keys to your great success in starting the product development team at Hampton Creek has been because you were, in essence, a student of the internet. And I want to hear a little bit about Hampton Creek, and then I'm hoping you can tell us a little some stories about you know, how the internet and the information age essentially helped you become who you are today.
Yeah, awesome. So my name is Chris. I'm a chef by trade. I've been cooking for 20 years. The last restaurant I was with Moto, underneath Tomorrow Cantu. Led the team there to a Michelin star. The reason I bring that up is because you have two chefs on the panel today all talking about food technology. And one of the reasons that I wanted to leave the kitchen was to actually talk about food technology and to put my skills where they belonged, which is seeing if we can revolutionize what food actually is, which brings me to Hampton Creek. And Hampton Creek is a very unique company where we actually look at and ask the question, what would it look like if we started over? It's kind of the fundamental question.
I'm going to write that down.
It's a great question. We should ask it across not just food, but everything, right? And that question has driven our company in the last 4 years to be in 23,000 plus retail locations, as well as having some of the largest partnerships within the food industry. And it's because we're looking at it differently. It's because we're asking the questions, what would make it more sustainable? What would make it healthier? What does good ingredients stand for? And that's kind of where, you start with that little small idea 4 years ago when I joined the company. And to answer your question about Google or the internet, there's a lot of great information out there. Sometimes it's connecting the dots of how certain things work in comparison to what you're doing. A lot of research has already been done, and we're kind of taking that next step as a company. So, I was able to now, we have 25 people just on the actual product development with another 40 that are in the deep science process of how we find these proteins. And these proteins are giving us functions like emulsification, binding, leavening, foaming, coagulation. It's the point now where we have close to 100 products that all have different functions coming from plants that when you look at the deck and the ingredients on the back, they're actually better for you. So kind of I hope that answers the question on the Google part.
It does partially, and I want to interrogate you a little bit
Okay.
about that. So you have people who are finding proteins.
Correct.
And they are probably looking in some kinds of databases, and they're doing some kinds of experiments. Do you think that there's ways of easing that burden? Do you see room for opportunity there for, in other words, developing information systems alongside the technologies themselves?
So that's the whole idea of what we're doing. So we're building an IP platform. So I look at Hampton Creek as two engines. You have the first engine, which is this amazing discovery protein platform, which is run by Jim Flatt and Lee Shea, who are some of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. And they can tell you a lot more in depth of how they do this. But we're taking a completely different approach. And instead of looking at soy and corn, we're looking at all the other plants out there in the entire world and wondering what they do. And through that, we're developing a robotics laboratory that's going to have a high throughput system. Because myself and another scientist working on a food processor wondering which plants will emulsify oil and water together, it can only go so fast. So we're miniaturizing it. We're having high throughput speeds to actually find out what these proteins are capable of doing. And from there, it then gets on to the second part of the engine, which is the product development part, where we then take those proteins and put them into low-hanging fruit, like our Just Mayo product, which you would put, a plant in there just to emulsify it. It's much more sustainable. The pricing is better. We're able to kind of go out and blow that out.
Great. Thanks.
And all that's going to be linked to, we're hoping to show the world how to do it.
So you just touched on something. You're going to show the world your IP platform?
Eventually, we would definitely open up all the doors. This is something that we want to keep to ourselves.
Fair enough.
A lot like Tesla, we want to actually show the world that it can be done, and then we want the world to follow suit.
Wow, I'm really looking forward to seeing that when you guys are ready to do it. So you've touched on two things that I think are really important. Well, you touched on more than that, but two that I'm going to grab. One is you're scaling down your experiments so that you can do them in parallel. And so we're back to the scaling down business. And you also talked about, in essence, bringing scientific workflows into the product development process.
Correct.
So let's come back to the scientific workflows for the product development process in a second, and let's return to scaling down. And do you have other technologies on the horizon that you're looking at, or product improvements you're looking at for Nomiku in terms of how you're scaling down, or you want to scale down further? Do you want to make it even smaller, or what?
When you
What's on the horizon
when
for-
you say scale down, I think of lean manufacturing, which is a version of scaling down, right? So when you lean manufacture, it is technically scaling down, and you get a more highly iterative process.
Right.
At any one time, I can stop the assembly line and just go right in and do it. So how we started was that we were makers. We traveled all across the United States with our open source DIY
Right.
sous vide machine. And then we actually went to China to scale up for 2 years. We lived right next to our factory. And then we moved everything back to San Francisco.
Wow.
We had to go to China to learn that type of manufacturing, the large scale, the waterfall, it's called manufacturing, where you do several 100,000 units at once, and then return it to be able to manufacture in San Francisco.
Right.
So with new technologies on horizon, now we're able to have a highly iterative process right here in San Francisco. Right over the bridge in San Francisco.
The Bay.
The Bay, yes, right in the Bay. And that's helped us make new technologies all the time. Like, we can just think up of one thing and then scale it to a few thousand units.
Right.
Like a rotovap, or like a vacuum machine, or a new bag that self-seals and releases air. That can happen today.
I will take every one of those. Rotovet first, though.
Oh, yes, chef. Oh, now I know how I know you, dude. I saw you. You look so freaking familiar. You're on the TV. Right?
Out of the bag.
Yes. If he looks really familiar.
That whole entire thing, if you've been talking about everything.
Yeah, if he looks familiar to you, it's because he was on Top Chef, right?
I was.
Yes. That's why.
So you've scaled up your process for manufacturing the machines, but in essence, the machine itself is a scaled down version of what you were using in the restaurant.
It is actually more powerful than the ones that you'll find in the restaurants.
Yeah, tell us about the Wi-Fi connectivity that you have.
The
What are
Wi-Fi
you doing with that?
Yes, we added that in because I just kept getting hella phone calls. Well, this was a mistake on my part to put my personal mobile number on my company's website. I got hella phone calls who were like, "Hey Lisa, what time and temperature do I cook chicken at? What time and temperature do I cook steak at?" And then I would be like, "Hang on, I'm getting in the car. I'm going to go over to your house to make sure you're doing it right." And then I was like, "Now this is a good experience." Right? I was like, how do I make sure that this happens every single time?
And people just invited you into their home.
Yeah. You know, I'm legit. I'm not on the TV yet as often, but like, people,
Town family, everybody gets to know you.
yeah. No, people just let me into their house because this is like, you know, people get into Lyfts and
You look
Ubers now.
trustworthy.
Exactly. I'm cute. I can dial it up. But yeah, and I was like, how do I just have this experience? And I was like, oh yeah, duh, internet. So you add Wi-Fi now. We have an app called Tender. The Tender your significant other won't mind is on your phone because it means that you're cooking.
This is Tender, not Tinder.
Yes, Tender. You could just search Nomiku on the iOS, and then it buzzes the time and temperature directly to the machine. And then you look at all these recipes, you're salivating, you just want to eat right now. Well, then you can just order our food, and it goes straight up into your machine. And we're working on this RFID technology where you just wave it in front of the machine, it recognizes the time and temperature, you just drop it in.
So you're selling food products to go into your machine as well?
Yes.
Interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the
Sure.
product development behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just what people needed. They were just like, Lisa, I just wish you could cook for me. I'm like, done. Done. You buy the ingredients, I'll come over to your house and then cook for you. And then my husband was like, can you come home one night? We're like, all right, we can scale this. We can scale this in the office in some way. We'll figure it out. I just want to know what the experience feels like first, and then develop products around it.
Right.
It's kind of like, okay, so this may be your first time hearing about Nomiku, but it's not the first time you heard about sous vide. It's a hot market. You know how like the microwave grew? The microwave was adopted faster than the telephone, the freaking internet, and the cell phone. And sous vide is growing faster than that. The microwave grew 2x per year. Sous vide is growing 2.5x per year. Like, I can't keep up. If I went to everybody's house, I wouldn't even be here. I would be still cooking somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So, in order to do that, I was like, we need to create an ecosystem, a platform, hardware, software, goods, so that everybody can experience it exactly how I want them to. Mm-hmm. To sound like I know I sound like a control freak. It's because I am, but this is how every good company serves the people that they really, really care about. It's like when MP3 players first came out. There were tons of them, just like you've probably heard of a lot of sous vide machines. But then the iPod came out with the ecosystem, with iTunes, and everybody's like, this is what I wanted. I'm like, yes, I want to give you what you want. And that's why we did the whole entire ecosystem. And it just stemmed out of me being silly, leaving my phone number up there, going to people's houses, seeing how they worked, and being like, okay, here you go. Now here's a suite of products.
So you have an ecosystem that's built, now it's being built around this scaled down machine with the internet connectivity.
Yes.
So economies of information, as I like to say.
Oh.
And you've got this, well, I mean,
He has
it is, right?
He has a PhD.
So if we were to look at your at your delivery model, Chris, with delivering food products, you're not necessarily in the game. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe how those two concepts fit into the Hampton Creek strategy? I know you talked a little bit about it before, but where do you see Hampton Creek going in terms of, I know you're developing novel proteins and whatnot, but are there specific areas in food products that you're wanting to get into? Do you guys see developing a technology platform as well that you would offer to other food product developers? And
so we've looked at a lot of those different options. We have worked with larger food companies on ingredients. We kind of look at the whole food system as, let's fix it. Not just one or two products, but we want to build an entire range of things that are a little bit more sustainable. They're going to be better for you. So as you think about, our first product was just mayo. It's the #1 condiment in the United States. Mayo, mayonnaise, not just mayo, but mayonnaise in general. It's used as an ingredient. It's used as a spread. It's used in dressing dilution. So that was an avenue to go after. We've also, gone after cookies, cakes, bakery goods. We have an amazing protein that actually gels and coagulates in a pan, just like an egg would. So literally we call it just scramble, which is coming out at the end of this year. We have a lot of things in the pipeline. I know that, me personally, I like to, as she said, walk on the moon. Yeah. I think creating a product that no one's ever seen before, or a food that no one's ever, like a category that no one's ever touched. Like I always joke that there was no cookie before there was sugar. As soon as we discovered sugar, we made cookies. I would love to see Hampton Creek actually develop brand new categories that have never been seen before. I don't know what that is because it's not there yet. But going along the trends of, like, what if we made a healthy sugar? What if we replaced dairy that actually was much better for you and much more sustainable, a lot less food miles? Those are kind of the thoughts that we have about how do we build that pipeline to create better products.
so you mentioned something there that we haven't got to yet, which is sustainability and more sustainable. How do you go about measuring how sustainable a food product is at Hampton Creek? What kind of things do you go through? What do you
we look at consumption of water. When you replace one ingredient with another, what is the ramifications of actually replacing those ingredients? So if we look at Maya, when we take out the emulsifier that was in there before, you think about how that got to the point, and then you replace it with a plant. So instead of going through all these steps to potentially bring this animal protein into the system, you could just take a crop and mill it and put it into the system. You're talking about a lot less food miles, you're talking about a lot less water used, you're talking about a lot less energy consumption. So that's kind of how we look at those major factors.
Water use, food miles,
Yep.
and energy consumption. Can you talk about food miles a little bit?
So, I mean, you think about, let's just take the standard conventional way of how a large company potentially would produce a dressing or a sauce, right? And we'll take the major functional ingredient, which would be an egg or dairy. You start with, here's their farm, right? That's raising a crop. That crop then gets fed to the animal. That's a lot of energy. That's already going in through. So water consumption, energy to feed the animals. Then that goes into the next step, which is, okay, now that we have this byproduct of this, now we've got to ship that to somewhere. That then gets shipped to a factory.
Right.
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to get to the end result, which then gets packaged and sent to the local grocery stores, right? Where we're saying, let's just take this much better for you ingredient here,
Right.
a plant, and that's it.
Right.
We'll grow it, we'll mill it, and then we'll send that out to our facilities where it's going to be processed.
Great. I do want to open up. We've got some great discussion going here. If any of you have any questions, please just raise your hand, and I'll come by with the microphone. I know it's not projecting sound out to the room, but it is being used for the recording that's taking place. So if any of you have a question, just raise your hand, and I'll come by, and then you can speak into the mic, and we'll be able to hear it. Yeah.
So how do you feel about the fact that it's a processed food? And earlier we were talking upstairs about the chef's kind of table, like going back to the raw vegetable and using all its pieces. And is that a struggle at all for you?
Yeah,
to
so
think about?
it's a great question. I actually have been asked that before, and I look at it as a chef. I was working in some of the best restaurants in the world. Like, I got to work for Chef Champagne at La France. I've gotten to see farm products literally brought to my door, and that's an amazing experience. But we're always going to have processed food, at least for the foreseeable future. I don't see that changing. I don't see this country or other countries getting away from that. And the question that I ask myself as a chef is, an opportunity arose that I could actually help and make that better and make that system better. And so that's kind of, I think we have to look at all different ways to do it. I would tell you the biggest trend that we should be looking at is going vertical and looking at urban farming and keeping everything as local as we possibly can. That's a belief that I have. That's something that I'm teaching my daughter. We have our own little garden, but that is not mainstream yet, and it's also not sustainable because we can't do that quite now. Although I'd love to see that happen in the next 20 years.
I think that's great. And you're right, I totally agree with you. We don't necessarily need fewer processed foods, we need better processed foods. And there's always going to be a need for packaged foods for people on the run, for people going hiking, for people doing whatever, for people who don't want to cook.
Education would also be a big thing to start up in this country about how to cook would be also very helpful.
Lisa, how do you go about measuring or quantifying or characterizing sustainability in your ecosystem of technologies as Nomiku is developing?
It's like ownership over the technology. Like if I was manufacturing in China, I don't really have that much ownership. And if you're a small startup, people don't pay attention to you. Like I was really romanced by this contract manufacturer, this factory. They're like, we made Nespresso. I was like, can I come and make my things with you? And they're like, yes, for sure. I'm like, yes. And I joined them and they didn't pay attention to me. What wound up happening is that I had to live right next to the factory. I would literally go in and turn on the lights and sit on the line and train the new people. I was like, I can be doing this in San Francisco. And now I am. So for me, sustainability means ownership, meaning like I understand each part of what's going on. So then I can replicate it anywhere. I don't have to go all the way to China, to Mexico. I can figure it out here. Maybe that won't always be the case, but like a huge part of it is ownership over the over the process and over the technology. Like a lot of what Hampton Creek is doing with their IP library, that kind of information, like information sustainability, is the biggest part of having sustainability overall.
Information sustainability.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the more you know, with like the rainbow over it and the star, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
It's just like if you, yeah, that kind of power, that kind of power helps you go anywhere. You know, there's like people who are survivalists, like, oh, I have these special shoelaces where I can make fire and stuff. I'm like, I have a mind that can make appliances. You know, and that is so super valuable. And that helps you do whatever you need to do.
So let me ask you about that. You went from being a chef in a Michelin star restaurant to making appliances.
Mm-hmm.
What was that transition like for you? Because it doesn't seem like one necessarily leads to the other.
Well, I think he's more chefy than me because he officially has a chef title. You know, when you're like a grand manger, I wouldn't call myself a chef. But chefing was my fun job. You know, it's like, oh, I really want to work with these people who have this kind of sustainable information. They can go anywhere. Like you can stage anywhere, and you can be like, I work at Jean Georges, and Danielle will be like, hey, get on the line, do it, and then you can learn more things. That's what like the stagiaire thing is. And now we're like computerizing it, quantifying it. But that transition was just like, I just want to learn something new every week. I got a real job at Hearst as an editor in the digital department, and I couldn't believe that people just sit down for 6 hours a day, for real. I was like, really? Really? This is work, and you do this for 30 years.
That was the hardest part of getting my PhD. A lot of sitting.
Yeah, it just blew my mind, and I wanted to learn something new every day. And thankfully, entrepreneurship is that hot ticket to learning something new every day. It feels terrifying because you don't know what you're supposed to learn. It's not like university, right? But like, that's what got me, and it was really much alike being a chef or being a journalist. Is that you want to learn something new every day. Now, like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, no nets, just jump. So it feels very similar, actually.
Interesting.
With the ethos, the kitchen.
And how did you get started?
I got started when I met this really cute plasma physicist at the gym. He is now my co-founder, husband, and baby daddy. He was getting his PhD in astrophysics, plasma physics. Less than 10 people annually get that degree from Princeton. I was like, that is cool. Let's get married.
You roped him in right away.
Yeah, I was like, that sounds good. But no, we started the company together, and that's how we got started, was that we went to these maker spaces, and we just amassed more and more people. It was like community driven.
And yeah, can we talk about that maker space for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
You were engaging people to make sous vides in the maker space?
Yeah.
And then you took control of it and went and started a company.
Yes.
What was that transition like? You went from something that was a community resource to something that is your own private company. How did that go?
That sounds fun. That still sounds fun to me. It's still really open because our app allows everybody to make their own recipes. Like there's this guy from Nebraska that made like sick ribs, and I just buzzed his recipe to my machine like over the weekend to make the ribs. It was pretty organic. It's just like I was just taking feedback from what everybody told me and then making it come true in a way, just solving the problem each step of the way. When I was in the makerspace, people were like, hey, love it, don't really want to solder this together for 6 hours. I was like, I got you. And then I solved that problem. And then when I made my first machine, people were like, oh, love it, but I don't know the time and temperature, and I don't know what to cook. I'm like, I'm going to solve that issue. So as you make more and more things, the community speaks to you, and then you just listen, and you just like stuff your feelings away. And then you solve problems, and that's how it went.
So community-driven science really propelled you.
That is the way science is supposed to be. I'm not anti-GMO, But I am anti the science behind it because it's not peer reviewed. It's not cool that it's
What do you mean it's not peer reviewed?
like, it's private you don't get to see what goes behind it. You don't know, but with recipes and everything, you know exactly what goes into it. It's the original open source thing, and you can keep perpetuating that in your private company. You can have some parts of your company that are open, and you are much better for it.
Any additional questions from the audience? Yeah.
So Chris, I'm curious, if you're searching and looking for proteins in plants to serve particular functions in food, are there any functions that you haven't been able to find any proteins or peptides to provide?
So you find proteins. The question, if people can hear, was are there proteins that we're not finding? The plant proteins have a lot of different functions. They might not have all the functions, so they vary in degrees of how they work. So we use a Canadian yellow split pea was the first emulsifying plant that we found. It's on our label. We don't hide anything. It worked better because of certain molecules and trends that we found out than a lot of other pea proteins. And then from there, we were able to build a robust chain system to bring that particular varietal of pea protein that trends in those directions. That's a great emulsifier. For our bakery platform, ironically, we use sorghum, which has been around for years and years and years, as it has a great binding ability. It has a little natural sweetness to it, so you're not adding a flavor that normally won't be there. It solubilizes very easy. We have another protein, which I can't talk about right now because it is powering our scramble, but we've seen with that one that it actually has almost 20 different functions to it. It's a powerhouse. Now, all those functions vary a little bit in how they work, but we've been able to find and locate and discover how these plants are actually doing the things, and then from there we can kind of isolate what do we want them to do, and we do it through very clean methods. Again, I can't go too much into it, but we're using acid salts and waters and treatments like that. So nothing that I wouldn't feed to my 5-year-olds. That's how I like to describe it as. But plants vary, and so do the chemistry and how they work.
So I want to kind of drill into that a little bit. Do you start with looking for a particular function? So you say maybe there's a food category you want to get into, and then there's a function you know that you need to replace, like an emulsifier. Mm-hmm. Is that really where most of your starting points, or can you talk a little bit about this, where you start the innovation process?
Well, it's been a little bit all over the place, to be honest. Like when we were a young company, so when we first were moving forward, we had some partners that were interested in us making a mayo, and so we looked for a protein that was an emulsifier. That was from larger groups having interest in us as a small company saying, we'd like to do this with you. It sounds like a great idea. From there, we discovered how to find these proteins, and now we've let the discovery team go like crazy. They can do whatever they like, and there's a whole pipeline of proteins that are going through. We don't know when we put a plant through our system what exactly we're going to get. There's some trends that we've already seen within different species, so we kind of know these things. But as we develop and go through the 400,000 species that are out there, some of it's just white space. We don't know what they potentially can do, and that goes into backing it up, like walking on the moon, finding something that no one's ever seen before and creating a completely different food system.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about searching for functional properties of foods in terms of the function they have in the food. Are you also looking for perhaps bioactive molecules, or is that a space that Hampton Creek is in, or
so
health promoting, I guess you might say?
Jim Flatt, who's our I call him chief of PD. He came through synthetic engineering, actually helped create omega-3s and omega-6s that you can go. It's really kind of a great story behind him and why he joined our team. And I think if we discovered things, we would absolutely love to go into that space. I think that's where we don't know what's out there, right. And that's why we're exploring it, and potentially to find more nutrients and being able to add those into in a healthy way. I mean, we'd love to 10x the food system when it comes to food being better for you. Right now, we feel like all of our products are a little bit better, like 1 times better. But our goal in the next 10 years is all of our products to be 10 times better than what's currently out there in the market, not just on flavor, but in health.
Terrific. more question over here. Come in back there. No, come back up front.
Just what role does the L word play in all of this? Luck.
There's
I've
always,
heard Josh Tetrick use that word.
there's always luck. Josh is one of the luckiest people I've ever met in my life. The flights that we've made together, I can't even believe it sometimes. You have to make your own luck though, right? I left kitchens for the goal of, instead of cooking for the 1%, cooking for 100%. A lot of the people at our company that are actually in this room right now know there's a lot of drive and motivation. We are, still in our mind a startup, and we put hours in that would be grueling in any kitchen because we want to get to that next step. We want to get to that next level. It's a mission behind what we're doing as opposed to, just going out there and trying to make this great company that's going to go IPO one day and make a lot of money. Like, we're all here because we believe that we can make something better. So I think that's very important to have that motivation because then you do create your own luck. Karma is something
Right.
I believe in. And
Absolutely.
the better your karma is, the better your luck becomes.
Right. Luck favors the prepared mind. There was a question over here.
Hi, Chris. Just curious, out of curiosity, you don't manage to extract all of the protein, and what do you do with the leftover split peas, etc.? Are you using them for
So
something different?
yeah, so we haven't really been
Getting
able
out more protein?
Yeah, we haven't been
Family
able.
sources.
Yeah, staff bill, right? We actually have a very unique. When we're talking about the scramble project, we're getting into recovery projects with some of that's coming off as we go through the isolation. Part of our recovery product with the scrambles, we've actually been able to pull off a very unique starch, and that starch is actually powering a new platform which we're still in just beginning phases of development, which is pasta. And what we found out with this starch is it actually elongates the cooking process. So as we create this pasta, and as you then cook it or boil it, the al dente, as a cook or a chef or a home cook would call it, is actually longer. So you can overcook your pasta and it still is nice and tender. And we believe that actually we'd be able to go through a retort process with it. So the idea that, one, it's an enriched protein pasta, and two, imagine a can of SpaghettiOs that you feed to your kid and the pasta's actually good for you and has bite to it. I know that seems weird because I'm a chef talking about Chef Boyardee, but the thought process that pasta could actually be better for you, people are buying it. It's that much of an incremental difference within their diet. It's kind of exciting to all of us.
Eduardo Boiardi is an amazing chef, by the way, Chef Boyardee. He was the first immigrant chef to make the head chef of the Ritz-Carlton.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and he went to Cleveland, opened up Giardino de Boiardi, cooked there like there was a line, like San Francisco style, and he would maintain quality control by growing mushrooms in his basement. One day, this new canning technology came over to him. We're like, you should can this stuff. He's like, aight, but spell my name out, Boyardee, so people can pronounce it.
Thanks for that tidbit. That was awesome.
I never knew that.
Amazing.
I might have a PhD, but I feel smarter just talking to you. Another question from the audience.
Lisa, can you talk about your experience using Kickstarter and the second campaign and when that might wrap up?
Oh, okay. So I got a lot of my starting capital from Kickstarter. So we raised $1.3 million on Kickstarter through two projects. The first one was $586K in 30 days. The second one, $750K in 30 days. And the second one was our most ambitious one, which is when we moved our manufacturing to the United States. And we started shipping just in January, and we're pushing through right now. I think we ran into a lot more delays than people expected. Are you a backer? Okay. he's gonna.
Where's
Yeah.
my unit? Why don't I have it yet?
He's gonna murder me after this. Yeah. When you don't have a revenue stream for a year when you do R&D, it's quite difficult. But miraculously, we've made it through a lot of the tough parts, and we're shipping every day. Does that answer your question, or does that sound PR-y?
I wanted to hear more about Kickstarter and how that works, and if you recommend that or.
Oh, if I recommend that, okay. So we had no choice but go to Kickstarter the first time. I went to a lot of venture capitalists, like a lot. 85. And I was like, I have this new technology. I really want you to fund it. And they were like, where's the market? I was like, everybody has a mouth. And this makes food that is ultra delicious. And I would cook like hella meals for these people. I would go to their office or they would come to my house and I would cook the meals. Nothing. So my back was against the wall. Let's go to Kickstarter. And it worked. And the second time around, people still don't believe me. What the hell? What's going on? You know, like maybe I'm not always like this. Like I do try to.
I'm having a really hard time.
No, I don't know what happens to me. I like clam up and become professional Lisa. You know, maybe I should be more like this. Then people would be into it, right? Okay. So I'm gonna try to be like this next time. But like, yeah, people still don't get it.
Once you lose control, then you talked about having control, and if you go to right, do you think that you have more control because you've gone to this crowdsourcing as opposed to?
No, way less control because you have like thousands of individual people who feel like they're investors, and I actually owe them a lot for believing in me when nobody else does. So yes, go to Kickstarter if you have no other option. I absolutely recommend it. That's just straight up.
Sounds like you're under a lot of pressure.
No, that's just straight up. Go to Kickstarter if you have no other option. If you do have any other option to like do your thing and you can articulate your things better than me, which I'm sure you can. Which I'm sure you may be able to. They have. There's hope in the world. Then I would not go the crowdfunding route.
So I have a question to pose to both of you. We've got about 10 minutes left, and not Hampton Creek, not Nomiku, but where do you see the kinds of science that you're involved in and the scientific workflows that are propelling your product development, the kinds of community science and maker space and community funding that you've experienced? Where do you see this taking food in general? If you could, give us a little bit of, what's in store for us in the next, 5 or 10 years?
Well, I mean, from Hampton Creek side, from my side, what I've seen so far is that it's opening people's minds up to what food potentially can be. If you looked at the space 10 years ago, what we're doing wouldn't have been bought by mainstream. It would have been considered kind of hokey or health food or whatever it is. And today we're literally changing FDA laws and regulations, opening up this space to give other opportunities, not just for our company, but for companies following behind us. And actually opening up the larger companies, the General Mills, the Unilevers, the Kellogg's of the world that have so much buying power and so much capacity to actually do wonderful things. It's giving them that there's a market share to do that in. So I'm really hopeful that this is kind of a turning point to looking at processed food in a way that was done in the past to a way that it can be done into the future. And there's a lot more to do within that space, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Lisa?
I've heard stories about some people who are eating their first tomato, like fresh tomato for the first time in America. I'm not talking like heirloom tomato. I discovered those like 4 years ago, you know what I'm saying? But like a real live tomato. I'm like, whoa, that exists. Like this kind of food desert in our own nation where people don't eat fresh food or don't know what food is supposed to taste like. And I think that's gonna get eradicated. It's gonna be completely eradicated. Like we're so much smarter now about the way that we transfer food, and people deserve more and they want more, right? They are watching Top Chef and they're just like, why don't any of my food taste like that or like look like that? And they want that experience. And people are rushing to cater to that, like that need. You can feel it, it's palpable, the heartbeat, the beat, like the drum marching forwards for people eating really, really good food. And that's absolutely gonna happen in the next 5-10 years. People will try like fancy things like, how rendezvous became like a word in America? We're gonna have like, gastrique is gonna be a thing that people know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say palpable is the word that people want. The heartbeat of flavor.
The heartbeat of flavor. You just gave me my new tagline. I love it.
You can have it.
Thank
Free
you.
charge.
Thank you. That's why I do these things.
So you actually mentioned something there that that I think is important, and that is you talked a little bit about some of these shows. You said Top Chef. There's a number of cooking shows. I don't even think we can count them anymore.
Yeah.
And also social media, especially among millennials, is just a buzz with people exchanging pictures of everything that they're eating. And do you guys see this playing a role, particularly social media? I mean, to me, it seems like social media is playing a big role. Do either of you want to comment on the role that social media is playing with your devices or with your company in terms of making people aware?
Dude, Instagram is our largest sales channel, period. We get the most followers on Instagram. I get the most feedback from Instagram because food is, you eat with your eyes first, right? So, yeah, for sure. I was like, for sheezy. Excuse me. For sheezy, for sure. I think that's the reason why sous vide has been adopted faster than the microwave. In fact, is that our networks that we have now.
Your social networks through social media.
Correct.
I mean, Hampton Creek has its own crew here, doing filming, who are incredible, led by Colby. Gives a shout out to him. But you know, it's very important for us to get the message out there, and that's the best way to do that. And I think President Obama proved it is through social media. It can really make the sway. It can help push the envelope, and it's free. And it doesn't cost you anything to talk about yourself or about your company or about what you're doing. And if it's good and just, people will listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other final questions? Yeah, one more final one. 1 second.
Are Hampton Creek products co-packed is one question, and then I didn't hear you talk about kind of pesticides since your products aren't organic. So where you kind of stand on that, because that obviously has a big sustainability impact. And then lastly, because you're dealing with plant proteins and the variability of plants in general, you know, have you had quality issues? Do you have really stringent COA programs, and how do you manage that?
Yes, across the board. But yes, we do use co-manufacturers. I consider them family. In fact, I spend an obsessive amount of time working with our co-mans, as you know. I literally spent a year of my life working in factories, being hands-on with them, getting to know who they are, literally their names and their wants and their needs and their beliefs, and getting them to believe in what we're doing. So yes, we absolutely use co-mans. I would love to see us get into our own manufacturing, but it's expensive, and right now we just don't have the bandwidth or the expertise to do that correctly. So it's on us to find great programs out there. We have an amazing operation team, as well as a QA/QC program to work with them. The second question I believe you asked was organics. Like, what about organics? Is anybody an organic buyer in here at all? Especially within processed food? It doesn't taste great in comparison to other products that are out there that potentially aren't organic. Organic is, in my opinion, in processed food, seeing beautiful organic food go into a jar for 9 months is tough as a chef. I'm not disagreeing one way or the other. This is my personal opinion. I don't think this is all Hampton Creek that I'm speaking for, but just on my personal level, organics are very difficult to do because you cannot use preservatives. Preservatives preserve a product, right? And the only way you can make organics really last is refrigeration. Refrigeration is super expensive, it's costly, and you know it's energy consumption. And then the third is you're asking about depth of our products and how can we maintain through crop deviation. So that's part of our screening process, is looking at plants like sorghum that are very hardy. They're grown throughout the entire world. They're able to withstand things like drought. They're able to stand heavy rain. They're very malleable when it comes to the seasonality of where they're from. So a lot of what we do is upfront and looking at a plant and saying, well, hey, this one little crop is doing all these wonderful things. You know, this isn't going to work right now. But I know a goal of ours as a company is to actually work with farmers and get this into a rotational system, where our crops can be part of, you know, a three-phase system where potentially even putting nutrients back into the soils through that kind of thing, and giving the farmers a little bit better price as we're buying from them. So there's a lot of questions we still have on that as we continue to grow and find more proteins. But the goal is to find things that are at the very top level, easy to grow, easy to cultivate, and sustainable.
Thanks. That's a great place to leave it. Please join me in giving our panelists a I think we're on time to get back upstairs for the next session. Thanks everybody for coming.